So Dana White just so casually at the UFC 300 post-fight presser announced that Dustin Poirier will be getting the title shot at 155 pounds against Islam Makhachev at UFC 302. Now, a lot of the initial reactions are, Dustin Poirier is getting an undeserved title shot and nobody wants to see it and blah, 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 blah. That's all I got to say to it. The bottom line is this. Dustin Poirier is being written off once again. And you cannot do that, ladies and gentlemen. You just cannot do that. I understand that Islam Makhachev is a very dominant force, and it is a very steep hill for Poirier to climb. But if there's a guy at 155 that is going to be counted out, that has a real shot at winning this thing, it's Dustin. And I know that everyone's going to sit there and say he's going to get steamrolled. He's just going to get taken down. He's going to get outstruck because Islam's more technical and a better striker than Khabib, which that is all very true in terms of Islam being better than Khabib. I've said that before. He's a much better striker. He's much more clean. He's more tactical. And he does have very good grappling. I would still give the grappling edge to Khabib in that department, but Islam, no doubt about it, is probably a better striker in my eyes than Khabib is. But when we look at this matchup, there's a couple things that I've seen that still give, if you're a Poirier fan, some hope. And that one being Adriano Martins back in the day is the only man, if you don't know who that is the only man to knock out Islam Makhachev. He is the one that was able to find that chin and put Islam down pretty easily. And when you watch that fight back, now before you say, well, that's a younger Islam and that is, earlier in his career, which again, very true. That's still a valid point. He's still kind of the same fighter, guys. He's still kind of the same fighter. His grappling has evolved and improved, but his striking has gotten a little bit more technical and a little more clean. Yes, he tucks his chin a little bit better. He doesn't overextend the way he did in this matchup against Martins back in the day. But if Islam Makhachev comes into this matchup for some reason thinking that he is this newfound striker because he went in there and knocked out Alexander Volkanovski who took a fight on short notice, I think he sees himself getting knocked out by Dustin Poirier. Now, he's not going to do that. Islam Makhachev is going to come into this fight with every intention of feinting level changes, striking a little bit when the time is right with Dustin Poirier, and shooting takedowns because there is a huge advantage in the grappling when it comes to Islam Makhachev. He is absolutely the better grappler between him and Dustin Poirier. It doesn't take any type of, MMA rocket scientist to know that if this fight hits the floor, Dustin's in trouble. With all that being said, what I like about Dustin coming into this matchup is his back was to the wall in a fight against Benoit Saint-Denis, who, if we're going to look around the 155-pound division, I'm not saying he's Islam Makhachev, but could we have really found a better opponent to get Dustin ready for Islam? I mean, feel free to comment your take below, but I really think that a guy like Benoit Saint-Denis was kind of the perfect opponent to get Dustin primed and ready for a matchup with Islam Makhachev. Now, yet again, I've said it is a steep hill to climb, and I still would favor Islam to win the fight, but you can't count out Dustin Poirier because I've said this before. Whenever Dustin Poirier goes in there against southpaws, he just seems to find a way to make it hard for these guys, right? I know that Benoit Saint-Denis was closing him down up against the fence. He was landing some things, and he was having some success. But Dustin Poirier is one of those guys who loves to play that game along the fence. He loves to kind of have his back against the rope, so to speak, and kind of rely on the counter boxing, which I mentioned. I was one of those guys who predicted Poirier to knock out Saint-Denis because of the boxing weakness that Saint-Denis has displayed. He would get aggressive up against the fence, and he would just get reckless and forget. He has some of the worst boxing defense in the division, and that's how I saw Poirier winning that fight. The biggest issue I have with Dustin in this matchup is not so much that he can be taken down, not so much that maybe Makhachev catches him on the feet. It's the fact that Dustin just cannot help jumping guillotine. He just cannot help it. And while, yes, he almost had Khabib in a position where maybe he could have finished him with an incredibly tight guillotine. That was some of the most trouble that we've seen Khabib in his entire career. That has also been the downfall to Dustin Poirier in matchups with guys that have outstanding grappling. Because when you go to lock up guillotine, for those of you that might not be aware of what I'm referencing, whenever you go to lock up guillotine and you jump guillotine, when people say jump guillotine, you jump, wrap your legs around, and you're squeezing and you're locking in that guillotine. You're really trying to sink this thing in. You are essentially accepting bottom position, because whenever you jump in the air and hold that position, the fighter that is being put in the position is probably going to fall to the ground. You're probably going to drag them down, and they are now basically essentially in your guard. Well, when you're going to do that against a guy like Islam Makhachev, if you're not able to finish that guillotine, which it's not very likely you're going to do that, the only kind of good news to that is you're going to in order to get safe from that guillotine, normally a guy will try to slip out the side control. They'll try to slip out the side, get out of your guard, because that is a safe place to be against the guillotine. But a guy like Islam Makhachev with high-level grappling that has been training this way for literally basically since, he came out of the womb, is going to be very comfortable in that situation to where if Dustin puts him in a guillotine, he's going to wait it out. He's going to try to create a little bit of space so he can, breathe as much as he can. And then eventually he's going to pop his head out. And now what? He's going to be in a dominant top position on top of Dustin Poirier, which is a worst nightmare scenario if you're the Diamond. And in their fight camp, Mike Brown, head coach, kind of head coach more or less at American Top Team, it's going to be telling Dustin, I swear to God, if you jump a guillotine, because he told him multiple times on the stool heading into that second round against Saint-Denis, do not jump guillotine, and Poirier still did it. And I understand that Poirier does have a very, very tight and very good guillotine, but in a matchup against Islam Makhachev, that is going to be incredibly dangerous, because if you don't finish it, which I'd give him basically a 5% chance that he could pull it off, the rest of that is at 95% that Islam Makhachev is going to end up on top of you, and now you're in a world of trouble, because now he's going to start to work for submissions. There's ground and pound, there's elbows, there's all sorts of different things, which is the worst case scenario Dustin can find himself in this matchup, is on the floor with Islam Makhachev on top of him. With all of that being said, in that first fight between Alexander Volkanovski and Islam Makhachev, we did see some moments where Volkanovski exposed some things that I think Dustin Poirier is going to be able to utilize. First of all, Dustin Poirier is going to have to just throw caution to the wind. If he wants to win this fight, he's got to be a little reckless and be okay with possibly getting clipped with a shot by Islam Makhachev. He has got to bite down, and he has got to take risks. That's very evident. Whenever you fought Khabib, if you just want to sit on the outside, play this kind of tactical game and kind of wait for them to see what they're going to do, you already lost the fight. You have to approach Islam, Khabib, these guys the same way, which is you have to go at them and be aggressive and take some crazy risks that, yes, they may get you in trouble, but on the opposite side, you may be able to catch them with something. Because if Dustin just sits on the back foot and lets Islam close him down, Dustin is not going to win this fight. But what we saw Alexander Volkanovski do to Islam, he threw those shifting combinations that Dustin Poirier honestly throws better than Alexander Volkanovski. And if you don't know what I mean, he starts in that southpaw stance, fires a left hand through, switches into orthodox, and comes over with a counter overhand and keeps switching as he moves forward. We saw Alexander Volkanovski land this and hurt Islam Makhachev in their first matchup. If there's a guy that throws that shifting combination step through better than Dustin Poirier, I'll take your recommendations, because outside of Gaethje and Poirier, those are the two best guys that I'm thinking of as I'm making this video that throw that combination, and I think Poirier does it the best. It's how he was able to hurt. He's been able to hurt several guys inside the UFC using that specific combination. And if he's going to hurt Islam, it's going to be by that combination. Now, the one thing Dustin Poirier struggled with Benoit Saint-Denis was when he got crowded up against the fence, which tends to be a little bit of the issue I have with Poirier in this matchup. He accepts being on the back foot a little bit too much, where he is going to have to be much more forward in this matchup, which, in all fairness to Dustin, he was against Khabib. He fought like hell while he could in that matchup. And that is exactly how he is going to have to approach Islam Makhachev in this fight. A low stance, move forward, keep him on the back foot, and just explode and throw everything you can at him. Because if Dustin just sits back and accepts being on the back foot and scooting and moving around, Islam is going to set him up, shoot for takedowns, and be able to use that fence in order to aid the takedowns. And that is one of the worst things that you can do, is have your back up against the fence, allowing Khabib, Islam, these guys to use the fence to their advantage. Because while you think like, oh, the fence is a great place to be because it helps you kind of get back to your feet, these guys, referring to Khabib and his team, these guys are so good at backing you up to the fence and just shooting in, grabbing your legs, putting you down, and then immediately triangling your legs up against the fence and dragging you down and pulling you out and away. It is just a nightmare. Now, obviously, maybe that's a little bit better than getting just taken down out in the open, right? Because you don't even have the fence to try to work back up from. So there's a little bit of a pro and con there. But when I look at this fight, Dustin Poirier, he can never be counted out, man. He's got outstanding boxing. He does have some really good calf kicks, and Islam is a southpaw, so the calf kick is going to be available. And Dustin is a guy that is going to be coming into this fight with almost nothing to lose. I think if he loses the fight, he might retire. That's the way that he may approach this matchup, because if he doesn't win this fight, what's really left for Poirier? Maybe there's a couple other fun fights out there for him. I don't know. But this seems to be that one last opportunity for Dustin. And if you don't think that Dustin's going to come into this and give it hell and give it everything he's got, you don't know the diamond, man. You don't know the diamond. Like I said, very steep hill to climb. It's going to be a challenge. This is probably the hardest fight of his career. Khabib won, this too. And Islam presents dangers that Khabib does not present. And I know that we all just keep comparing the two. And the reason is because, one, they train together and, have grown up together, and they have a very similar style in terms of the grappling. But I would also like to remind people, Islam Makhachev is coming off 2 fights against 45ers. The one being against, Alexander Volkanovski the first time, where Volk gave him hell. Volk was very hard to take down, which Volk does have better wrestling than Dustin Poirier, but I would argue and say Poirier has better jiu-jitsu than Volkanovski. So we'll have to see how that kind of, I would like to think that Volkanovski's style, as well as Volk, is a little bit shorter and just kind of a meatball. That is harder to grapple against than a guy like Poirier. But coming into this fight, if Dustin Poirier is willing to take some wild risks, he takes some risks, but I mean really taking some risks, and he throws the kitchen sink at Islam right away. He tries to fight behind that left hand, sets up that counter hook that he landed on Benoit Saint-Denis. I think that there's a shot that Dustin Poirier could get Islam Makhachev out of there. Now, I don't think it's very likely. And I'm a big Dustin Poirier fan. Because when we look at this fight, we know what Islam's about. We know he's well-rounded. We know that he's clean on the feet. He's gotten much better, but he is still very hittable. And I do think that he is going to look to try to take this fight to the floor. Dustin Poirier needs to be ready for that. And even when you know what Islam's game plan is, the scary thing about Islam is his striking has came a long way to the point where he is a lot more confident on the feet. Now, that's the question that begs us. Is he going to be too comfortable on the feet where he decides to stand in front of Poirier and give Poirier the chance that, I guess we would all be kind of hoping for as fans is kind of that, opportunity for Poirier to knock him out. But I want to hear from you all down in the comments. Like this video, comment your thoughts below. Do you think that Poirier has a shot, or do you guys just think Islam's going to steamroll him? Drop your predictions below. Subscribe to the channel if you have not already. I appreciate you all. See you next time.